Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Believe in Lions podcast, and welcome back to football. It is officially here. Training camp now has not one, but two practices down. The Lions are back. Football is back, and it has been a slow off season. We talked in April, we talked in May. We had the draft. We had free agency back in March. We had some contract extensions right before the draft, and Amon-Ra St. Brown and Penei Sewell. And we had Jared Goff sign his contract in May. But since then, the entire month of June was just quiet. Lips were sealed. There were no rumors, nothing really coming out of the Detroit Lions. And it's just so different from the way that it used to be. It used to be that, hey, we've got so much news coming out of the Lions. There's unhappy players. There's players linked to the team. Oh, who could they sign? Which veteran could they take a shot on? This year, it was just complete silence after the draft and after OTAs and minicamp. Just nothing going on. And it was both painful because it was slow and we all missed our Lions, but it was also great because you didn't have anything to worry about. There was no logging onto your phone in the morning and seeing something awful had happened and a player was in trouble, like Jameson Williams last year with the suspension. There was none of that. It was just a good off season. But now we are back talking Detroit Lions, and there's a lot to talk about. We start with Dan Campbell. Not only does Dan Campbell have a new podium, a Myers branded podium. I don't know if you've seen it, but it is massive. It is probably 2, 3, 4 shoulder widths wide of Dan Campbell. It comes up to the middle of his chest, and Dan Campbell is a big dude. For the shorter players, once Khalif Raymond gets up there on the podium, they're going to need a stool or something. But either way, I wouldn't be surprised if this podium doesn't last long. But either way, I do love the podium, and I love that Dan Campbell is back. Dan Campbell, giving everyone what they want, says that the Lions won't get complacent, and the way he learned that is through his experience with the New York Giants in 2000. The Giants were coming off a Super Bowl appearance, lost to the Baltimore Ravens, got destroyed in the Super Bowl by the Ravens, and the next year, they lost their identity. They lost their mojo, finished 7-9 the year after finishing 12-4. And Dan Campbell is determined to make sure that does not happen again, since the Lions will not lose their identity. The Lions will be the same Lions that they were this past season. Brand new podium, brand new jerseys, same Detroit Lions with the grit, with the motivation. And I just love it. I love hearing from Dan Campbell. I love all of it. And I love the fact that people are excited about the Detroit Lions. We had some visitors. We had Taylor Lewan, the former left tackle at Michigan, who played a bunch of years for the Tennessee Titans, former offensive line mate at Michigan next to Graham Glasgow. So there's still that connection going on. We also saw the world champ in boxing, Clarissa Shields, a native of Flint, Michigan, giving Amon-Ra St. Brown some tips. And then there was the special guest that everyone's talking about, all the buzz on Hulk Hogan. And I'm not going to make this political, but Hulk Hogan is just a liar and a racist, and I just have no interest in Hulk Hogan. This is not politics. This is just, he's not a very nice guy. And so I was not happy to see him at the Detroit Lions facility. But then when you hear what the Lions have to say about it, he wasn't invited by the Detroit Lions. The coaches didn't invite Hulk Hogan out. The front office didn't invite Hulk Hogan out. Hogan sent a letter or an email or whatever to the media relations department and said, hey, I'm going to be in Detroit trying to sell my beer, my real American beer. And so the Lions said, hey, oh, okay, well, you can come to our practice. You know, we let everyone come to our practice. So yeah, sure, you can come here. And he was seen alongside Dan Campbell, not seen alongside Sheila Ford, unlike Clarissa Shields. So just a little bit of difference there. That's my thoughts on the situation. Just not a Hulk Hogan fan over the past 2 years and some of the things that he has said. Just not my kind of guy. And anyone who says that they've wrestled 400 days out of the year when there's only 365 days out of the year, like, that's just an obvious lie. So many other obvious lies from Hulk Hogan, even if he was going back and forth from Japan to America. You're not getting up to 400 days of the year, but that's just who Hulk Hogan is. Moving on, though, and back to the Detroit Lions. Great day from Jake Bates. Jake Bates, the UDFA, the signing from the USFL, the Michigan Panthers, Jake Bates, who was electric in the UFL this past season for the Panthers. 6 of 6 in practice. Just a beautiful, beautiful day from Jake Bates. We did not see Michael Badgley. He was not kicking today, but we did see Jake Bates, and it was glorious. And other than that, we saw pretty much everyone else. We saw the entire team except for Michael Badgley, and we didn't see Christian Mahogany, the offensive lineman that was drafted in the 6th round at Boston College. He missed the first 2 days of practice with an illness, so we didn't see him at all. And we didn't see DJ Reader on the field, but we did see him working out. He was running up the hill, dubbed Mount Patricia. He's being cleared for football. The Lions, as always, they're playing it slow. They're playing it smart. They are not rushing players back from injury. So DJ Reader, the only player still on the PUP list. Christian Mahogany will be back once he recovers from his illness. But that's it. Everyone else is back. The other players that started on the physically unable to perform list on day one, Brian Branch, Marcus Davenport, and Giovanni Manu were all cleared. And on day 2, earlier today, Donovan Peoples-Jones was cleared. Traquan Smith was cleared. Carlton Davis and Amik Robertson, 2 of the starting cornerbacks, did return. So let's break down that secondary, because day 1, there was no Carlton Davis. There was no Amik Robertson. They're both expected to be starters on this team. And so day 1, we had Terrion Arnold at 1 starting cornerback slot on the outside, which we do expect to see come week 1. It is expected that we will see Carlton Davis on 1 outside corner and Terrion Arnold as the other outside corner. But in the meantime, Enos Rakestraw, the cornerback out of Iowa, out of Missouri, drafted in the 2nd round. That black and gold uniform had me confused looking at the picture in my mind's eye. But either way, Enos Rakestraw, the 2nd round pick, was starting on day 1 as an outside cornerback alongside Terrion Arnold. And in the slot, it was Emmanuel Moseley. We all remember Emmanuel Moseley, signed by the Detroit Lions last year, coming off injury, wasn't going to play to start the season, was dealing with his injuries. I think it was an ACL that he tore. It might have been an Achilles, but either way, he was injured. And then he comes back, and in his first game back, Emmanuel Moseley, another season-ending injury, another devastating lower body injury, and Emmanuel Moseley, who we had so much hope could come in and take over one of those outside starting cornerback slots. It just never happened. And so instead, we eventually get Kindle Vildor starting outside. We had Jerry Jacobs starting outside before that. The hope was Emmanuel Moseley would be starting. Didn't work out that way, but now he is back. He is practicing, and he was starting in the slot on day 1 before the return of Amik Robertson. So now Amik Robertson, he is back, and he's practicing with the first team defense. He's the starting slot cornerback for the Detroit Lions. A little bit of Emmanuel Moseley, but it's nice to see that cross training. And it's just nice to see that Emmanuel Moseley is back, even if he's going to be cornerback 4, cornerback 5. That is just such a better depth position to be in than the Lions were in last year. So when Robertson returns, when Carlton Davis returns, we see Carlton Davis outside, Terrion Arnold still starting outside, and Amik Robertson moves into the slot. And I love it. I absolutely love it. And then you've got Emmanuel Moseley who can play slot. You've got Enos Rakestraw, who's going to be playing outside, going to be cross-trained in the slot as well. You've got Kindle Vildor, who's now your 6th cornerback, and he is a guy that started for the Lions last year. And you've also got Brian Branch, who can play in the slot, who will play in the slot at times this coming season. But for now, Brian Branch is officially a safety, and that's what it's looking like it's going to be to start the season. It's going to be Brian Branch as one of those starting safeties. And on day 1, it looked pretty clear. Okay, well, Kirby Joseph starting next to Brian Branch. That makes sense. Branch a little bit more physical, a little bit more of a heavy hitter. So we put Kirby Joseph as his tag team partner in the secondary, and we've got a free safety, classic free safety in Kirby Joseph, long, rangy, play in the deep field. We've got Brian Branch, the classic strong safety, can play in the box. He's physical, and that made sense. But then on day 2, it's a new combination. Brian Branch still back there starting at safety, but instead of playing next to Kirby Joseph, it's Ife Melifonwu, who came on late last season, had a huge breakout manning that other safety slot after CJ Gardner-Johnson goes down, after some shuffling back there. Melifonwu has the big breakout. And so on day 2, it's Melifonwu starting next to Brian Branch. So we officially have a competition here for that number 2 starting safety. It looked pretty clear. It looked pretty clear cut that it was going to be Kirby Joseph. Not so fast. Ife Melifonwu is still going to make his case. And there will be times that Brian Branch will walk down into the slot. The Lions played a lot of 3 safety looks last year with CJ Gardner-Johnson, Kirby Joseph, and Ife Melifonwu all on the field at the same time, along with Brian Branch in the slot. So we're going to see more of that. That's going to be their big nickel personnel. Base nickel is going to be Amik Robertson in the slot. And, maybe he kicks outside and Terrion Arnold heads to the bench when they go into the big nickel. There are just so many options in this secondary. It is so different from last year, and it makes me so excited. And I'm also excited about the defensive line as well. Terrell Williams, the former Tennessee Titans defensive line coach, already making an impact. You hear from all the beat reporters, you hear from Dan Campbell, how excited he is about the defensive line and how different they look with Terrell Williams as their play caller, as their position coach. Sorry, I should have said, but just how different it is. Even without pads yet, it is still a complete change from what we saw last year. They're all playing with their hair on fire. Aiden Hutchinson starting camp and just looks like he's taken that next step heading into year 3. It was a big jump from year 1 to year 2. Looks like we might have an equally sized jump from Aiden Hutchinson heading into year 3. We all know Hutchinson's going to get that contract after the season. He is going to be a Lion for a long time, but for now, it is just so lovely to see him take that next step. He's facing off against Penei Sewell. Iron sharpens iron, and they just continue to get better alongside each other. Who's going to be playing defensive end opposite Aiden Hutchinson? Well, right now, it's looking like it's Josh Paschal versus Marcus Davenport. We mentioned earlier, Marcus Davenport started on the PUP list, came back at the start of the first practice, so he is being eased into the rotation. He's not going full go yet. So maybe it's not as much of a competition as it looks like right now. But for now, Josh Paschal, Marcus Davenport, they are squarely in the running to be that number 2 edge rusher opposite Aiden Hutchinson. Now at defensive tackle, we've got DJ Reader sitting out. So that means Broderick Martin starting as the nose tackle next to Aleem McNeil. Aleem McNeil sitting at that 3 tech, the pass rushing interior defensive lineman. DJ Reader going to be the run stuffing nose tackle. Broderick Martin, last year's 3rd round pick out of the small school. He is first man up to be the number 2 defensive tackle should anything happen to DJ Reader to delay his starting of the season. Looks like he's going to be fine. Looks like he is well ahead of schedule, but Broderick Martin will be that next man up, which is just so great for a player who was not a factor last year, a player who was hardly active last year, which was expected. He was coming out of Western Kentucky. He was a small school guy, but just a big, physically athletic freak. And that's why the Lions drafted him, to learn that first year. And now to see him already getting reps with the ones, it is just perfect. You couldn't ask for anything better. If he becomes another contributor from that draft class that already gave us Jahmyr Gibbs and Jack Campbell and Brian Branch and Sam Laporta and Hendon Hooker, who's looking like he's going to be a contributor now. We'll get more to that later. But if they can get a 6th person contributing from that draft class in Broderick Martin, beautiful, just beautiful. Now, it's not just Broderick Martin getting reps with the first team. We also saw Levi Onwuzurike work in as the 2nd defensive tackle. Now, this is more in pass rush situations where there's no true nose tackle. They'd put Levi O in there instead of Broderick Martin to get some of that pass rush juice. Levi O also playing a little bit of edge rusher as well. Looks like he's taken over the John Kaminsky role, at least through the first 2 days of camp. And John Kaminsky is working with the third team. John Kaminsky, who had to take a pay cut this offseason to remain with the Detroit Lions, he is now running behind Levi Onwuzurike as that defensive tackle, defensive end, hybrid pass rusher. And Kaminsky's starting to work behind last year's practice squad player, Mitchell Agude, who was a linebacker / defensive end, kind of a hybrid role. Now Kaminsky's starting to fall behind these players, starting to work with the third team only through 2 days. Now, it is early. There are things that can change. Kaminsky could have a strong camp. There could be injuries. But for now, John Kaminsky, who has been a productive player for the Detroit Lions for the past 2 years, looking like he's the odd man out. He's on the outside looking in to make this roster, which is just such a difference from the past 2 years where the Lions just had nobody opposite Aiden Hutchinson, had nobody opposite Aleem McNeil in the defensive tackle room as well. It's a good problem to have. And we're also seeing the same thing happen at linebacker because last year's starter, Derek Barnes, is also the odd man out. Derek Barnes, who replaced Malcolm Rodriguez in the starting lineup in his third year in the league. Malcolm Rodriguez in his second year of the league. Derek Barnes takes over to be that starting Mike linebacker. Alex Anzalone playing the will position, the weak side linebacker position. And now Jack Campbell, who was the third linebacker on the Detroit Lions last year, did play a lot of snaps, but wasn't an official starter. Now Jack Campbell is taking control. Jack Campbell is the Mike, the middle linebacker, the primary guy on the inside. It's only a matter of time before he starts calling the plays as well. Next to Alex Anzalone, who again is that weak side linebacker. He's a little bit more free. He's more in coverage. It's just different. And it's a good problem to have. Last year, so much of Alex Anzalone and Derek Barnes. This year, Derek Barnes is going to be that third linebacker. He can play back up to Jack Campbell as the middle linebacker. He can play back up to Alex Anzalone as the weak side linebacker. But he is now experimenting with a new position. Derek Barnes is playing the Sam linebacker. Now, for some teams, a Sam linebacker is an off-the-ball linebacker. It's just that third guy, the strong side linebacker. It's the third linebacker in the rotation. Not the case with the Detroit Lions and the Aaron Glenn defense, though. With New Orleans Saints, it was the same thing. The Sam linebacker, the strong side linebacker, is a hybrid position. It's a stand-up edge, basically. So when the Lions go to those 5-man fronts that they loved so much last year, it was a role that everyone wanted to see James Houston take over before his injury. Stand up, edge rusher, outside the defensive end. That's what the Sam linebacker position is. Now, instead of Julian Okwara, a little bit of Romeo Okwara, now it's going to be Derek Barnes who's repping at that position, playing more of a pass rush role. Still going to be asked to drop into coverage, but it just is such an upgrade from where the Lions were last year. You're taking a starting linebacker and finding a new position for him because your starters are too good. And James Houston, who we saw as a rookie have that breakout season, who we had such high hopes for last year, he's also competing to be that Sam linebacker, that extra pass rusher when the Detroit Lions go to those 5-man fronts. It's a great problem to have. The depth of the Detroit Lions, the fact that they're taking players from last year who were starters and now their depth, their complementary pieces, the fact that you're having draft picks who were only drafted as projects already finding a role in year 2. It's just such a different defense for the Detroit Lions. I am just so happy and so excited for what is to come. The defense is upgraded across the board. The cornerbacks are upgraded. The safeties are upgraded. The linebackers are upgraded. And the defensive line, both defensive tackle and edge rusher, looks to be upgraded as well. The Lions, great offseason with their moves, great decisions with their draft picks, and it is shaping up to be a great defense on top of an already dominant offense, which we know And part of that dominant offense is Jahmyr Gibbs, who's been slowly returning from some soft tissue injuries that he was dealing with during OTAs, during minicamp. But Jahmyr Gibbs looks like he's healthy. Of course, it's the Lions, so they're going to bring their players along slowly in practice. But Jahmyr Gibbs looks like he is good to go. And he's been spending more time with the wide receivers as well. He's been doing wide receiver drills. He's been working all offseason with Amon-Ra St. Brown on his craft as a route runner, as a threat in the receiving game. If Jahmyr Gibbs finds that next level, I mean, he did have 52 receptions last year, but under 400 yards on those 52 receptions. He wasn't particularly explosive or electric on a lot of his work in the receiving game. If he can find that next level with his route running, with his shiftiness, Jahmyr Gibbs is going to just continue to show that he is one of the best young running backs in the NFL. Behind Jahmyr Gibbs, of course, there's David Montgomery, who's not so much behind Jahmyr Gibbs, kind of co-starter along with Jahmyr Gibbs, but behind those two, Craig Reynolds, currently working as the top backup running back. Zonovan Knight did get praised by running back coach Scotty Montgomery on day 2 for his work. And then there's still Sione Vake as well, the former safety from Utah, drafted in the 4th round by the Detroit Lions, hoping that he can become a playmaker both in the running back position room as a receiver as well, and as a kick returner as well. So the Lions running back room is competitive. The Lions running back room is exciting. And so is the quarterback room. Of course, it's Jared Goff, who looks as good as ever. But behind him, it is a competition. Hendon Hooker is working with the second team on day 1. He's the backup QB for the first day of practice, and he is crisp. He is clean. He is slinging it. Hendon Hooker showing early in training camp why he was drafted to be the future backup to Jared Goff. And then on day 2, we get Nate Sudfeld working as the backup quarterback. Hendon Hooker moved to the 3rd team, and he continues to dominate against the 3rd team. And so some people might think, okay, well, is this a bad thing that Hendon Hooker's moving back and forth between the 2nd and 3rd team? Shouldn't we want our backup quarterback to be so good at it that he just earns the position as backup right away? I mean, maybe that would be great, but it just shows that the Lions aren't handing anything to anyone. And if Hendon Hooker dominates against the first team, if he dominates against the second team with the backups and then dominates with the 3rd team as well, it's only a matter of time before he officially seizes that backup job, which is what the Lions want, which is what the Lions need. And I know I've just been a positive Pete this entire podcast, but what is there to say bad about the Detroit Lions? I mean, anything negative that you can say right now other than my rant on Hulk Hogan is pretty much just, well, what if? Well, what if injuries happen? Well, what if players don't improve as much as we're hoping for? Okay, but we're hearing that they're improving the way we hoped. We're healthy right now. All I can say is good things for the Detroit Lions, and the player that is getting good things said about him more than absolutely anyone on the roster is Jameson Williams. Waymo, JMO, doesn't matter what you call him. You have to call him the most talked about player at Detroit Lions training camp after he was the most talked about player during minicamp, during OTAs. We've just heard it time after time after time, just from last year, where the talk was Jameson Williams has a lot of improvement to do. We were hoping he was ahead of schedule. He hasn't taken that jump that we hoped, to now just Jameson Williams is the best player at OTAs and minicamp. Amon-Ra St. Brown coming out and saying that he knows Jameson Williams is going to have a breakout year. And then for us to see it on social media, the deep shot to Jameson Williams, where he just runs by everyone. As Tyrion Arnold put it, he's running a 4.1. Jameson Williams very well might be the fastest player in the NFL, bar none. He might be faster than Tyreek Hill. He might just be the fastest player in the NFL. But it's not just pure speed. That's not going to help you dominate in the NFL. I mean, it'll work from time to time. it'll work often, but you got to work on your craft. You got to work on your route running. And we've seen that from Jameson Williams too. We saw it today. There was another highlight where he caught it over the middle. It was more of a contested catch. We saw it in practice where he was just getting open. Jameson Williams has taken that next step forward. He's officially a starter at this point alongside Amon-Ra St. Brown. And even though he threw up on day one, Dan Campbell doesn't care. Says he can throw up all he wants as long as he keeps making those types of plays. Jameson says he ate the wrong thing for breakfast. I mean, it's no surprise, right? The guy who eats his McDonald's McDoubles with ice cream on them, the guy who eats his loaded Cheetos, nachos. Jameson Williams eats some food that would hurt my tummy personally. So I'm not going to be upset when his tummy ends up getting hurt and he throws up on the field, especially if he's going to play like that. Now, there is one slot on the offense that is still up for grabs. The offensive line is set. Tight ends are set. Running backs are set. But that third wide receiver role is still up in the air. Khalif Raymond is a part-time starter. At the very least, he could be a full-time starter, but he also has a great skill set on punt return. So maybe they don't want him to play full-time on offense because of his work on special teams. So for now, with Donovan Peoples-Jones not practicing on day one and slowly being brought back into the offense on day two, it's Khalif Raymond and Antoine Green who are working as that third wide receiver. Antoine Green, last year's 7th round pick out of North Carolina, worked with Drake May, helped him get drafted where he was. Antoine Green, who rode the bench most of last season, he is now working with the first team. Now, maybe that continues. Maybe Antoine Green does run away with the 4th wide receiver job. Hell, maybe he even beats Khalif Raymond, becomes the wide receiver 3. Or it's more likely that Donovan Peoples-Jones probably gets healthy, works his way back up, and maybe it's a 3-man committee at the wide receiver 3. Khalif Raymond's going to get his snaps no matter what. Donovan Peoples-Jones was getting snaps at the end of the year, so maybe he continues to do that. And maybe Antoine Green is too good to deny. It is a good problem to have. For now, Doris Fountain working as that wide receiver 5, but we've got Caden Davis, we've got Maurice Alexander, we've got Traquan Smith coming off the PUP list as well, so he's going to be getting up to speed soon as well. So when the biggest question mark on the offense is the wide receiver 3, and we've got 3 guys who can answer that question right now, whether they do it by themselves or in a committee, plus a bunch of players that could work their way into the offense. I mean, I said it earlier, but what is there bad to say about the Detroit Lions right now? The sky is the limit. Dan Campbell's not going to let his team get complacent. Everyone that we hoped would take a step forward, Aiden Hutchinson, Jameson Williams, Hendon Hooker, Brian Branch, they're all showing that step forward. It is just a great time to be a Detroit Lions fan, and I cannot wait to continue throughout the offseason, throughout training camp, talking about this team alongside my host, Glover Quinn. But until then, we will see you next time.